If one of Donald Trump's goals during Tuesday's debate was to show that Kamala Harris would be a weak world leader, he failed. She managed, after all, to hold her own against him while navigating topics unusually tricky for a Biden administration official, such as the chaotic U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan and the politically dicey Israel-Hamas war. On the second, Harris repeatedly stressed the need for a two-state solution, for instance, showing her support for Palestinians while also insisting she'll defend Israel. Foreign officials watching the Philadelphia face-off weren't expecting, and didn't get, many policy specifics from either candidate. But many of those I spoke to said they wanted to see if Harris could stand up to a man who can be a bully, especially toward women, and rattle his political opponents. Some Trump critics had argued prior to the showdown that he was a stand-in for the autocrats a future President Harris may encounter, the Vladimir Putins and Xi Jinpings of the world. By the time the debate was over, several foreign officials from both U.S. allies and more neutral countries told me they felt more confident that Harris could handle the tricky personalities she'd encounter while in the world's most powerful job. Composed, authoritative, and presidential, one European diplomat raved. She even managed to laugh at him, a senior European official marveled. Her ability to manage Trump offered assurance that she could navigate tough personal relationships. Given that international relations often come down to the nature of personal relations, this matters. Since Harris has become the candidate, foreign officials I talked to have described her as a bit of an unknown, at least when compared to President Joe Biden or Trump. To a degree, they're unsure where Biden's foreign policy views end and hers begin. By the end of the debate, the foreign officials I was in touch with came across as more certain that Harris was her own woman, although they stressed they still wanted to know more about her policy ideas. All were granted anonymity to discuss a sensitive issue. The main foreign affairs issues that came up were the wars in Gaza, Ukraine, and Afghanistan, including the deaths and chaos that accompanied the 2021 full U.S. military withdrawal from the latter. Trump and Harris both called the other weak on just about every one of these fronts, but Trump's claims were more exaggerated. He alleged that Israel would cease to exist within 2 years if Harris becomes president and that he'd resolve the Russia-Ukraine war while still president-elect. Trump also tried to link border security and immigration, which are more traditionally viewed as domestic matters, in with his critiques of Harris on foreign policy. The Republican didn't directly answer when asked if he wanted Ukraine to win the war Russia launched against it. "I want the war to stop," he said in an answer that will only invite more allegations that he's too friendly to Russia, and Putin in particular. In between throwing brutal glances at Trump, Harris appeared well-prepped for the moderator's questions and the former president's barbs. The U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan was one of the lowest points of Biden's tenure. Harris firmly backed the broader decision to leave, but also used the opportunity to blame Trump for negotiating a doomed peace agreement with the Taliban. On Israel and the Palestinians, Harris began by noting that it was the Palestinian militants of Hamas who launched the latest war and insisted that she would always help Israel defend itself. She made no suggestion she'd hold up military aid to Israel, but the Democrat also called for a ceasefire to the war in Gaza and used a phrase that many in the upper echelons of the Biden administration have stopped using: two-state solution. It was a promise to Muslim American, Arab American and other voters who have been infuriated by Biden's handling of the war that Harris believes Palestinians should have their own country. Trump at times would bash Biden, his former opponent in the race. He called Biden a weak, pathetic man and even claimed Biden hates his vice president because she replaced him as the Democrats' presidential nominee. "You're not running against Joe Biden. You're running against me," Harris said at one point. Trump's maneuvers and claims didn't surprise the foreign officials. They're accustomed to his unpredictability, ire toward U.S. allies and courting of strongmen, all of which came through at various points Tuesday night. Officials from American allies overseas remained perturbed by Trump's promises of imposing new tariffs. Some were impressed by how Harris managed to bait Trump. Her mentions of people leaving his rallies or his alma mater, DT, took the bite every time, the senior European official said. But difficult world leaders are not all alike, and they're certainly not all like Trump. A withering gaze or a loaded comment from Harris may not rattle a Putin. "I think people have a sense Putin is a cooler and scarier customer," a Latin American official told me. Still, Harris's performance reminded me a bit of a moment in one of the 2008 presidential debates between John McCain and Barack Obama. McCain, of course, had a long track record of standing up to tyrants. He'd spent years as a prisoner of war during Vietnam. But the younger, less experienced Obama tried to show that he, too, was no shrinking violet, especially when it came to al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, when Obama said, "We will kill bin Laden. We will crush al-Qaeda." On the debate stage that night, I suddenly could see him running the show in the Situation Room. To much of the world, Harris made a strong case Tuesday that she has the same potential. The presidential debate accomplished more for Harris than it did for Trump. Presidential debates have impact when they address questions and concerns about the candidates that are top of mind for voters. As the crucial presidential debate began, in a race that was statistically dead even, both candidates had work to do. Kamala Harris faced three key challenges. First, 37% to 42% of voters in some swing states knew virtually nothing about her except that she serves as Joe Biden's vice president. Filling in this gap, or at least beginning to, was job one. From the very first minutes of the debate, it was clear that she knew she had to define herself and that she did, as a child of the middle class who, in contrast to Trump, was not given $400 million to start a business. In addition, she repeatedly came back to her experience as a prosecutor. Second, Harris has shifted her position on many important issues: health care, Medicare for all, climate change, fracking, and immigration, decriminalizing border crossings, among others, since she ran for the nomination in 2020. This left people wondering, what kind of Democrat is she? A classic California progressive or the next generation of the Clinton, Obama, and Biden-style center-left? She had to persuade voters that the new version of Kamala Harris is the one they will get if she is elected. Here her performance was more mixed. She explained her shift on fracking but didn't give as clean and crisp an answer as she could have on other issues where Trump has accused her of flip-flopping. However, she defended the Biden administration and her participation in the bipartisan immigration legislation that Trump killed. She let the audience know that both she and Tim Walz are gun owners who have no intention of taking away people's guns, and she pushed back against the charge that she was weak on crime by emphasizing her experience and record as a prosecutor who put criminals behind bars. Third, as is the case with every candidate who hasn't previously occupied the presidency, Harris had to convince swing voters that she has what it takes to serve effectively as the nation's chief executive and commander-in-chief. Simply put, they needed to be able to see her as big enough to be president, a barrier that some previous candidates, such as Michael Dukakis in 1988, failed to cross. Harris passed this test easily. She never got flustered, she made her points concisely and quickly, and she spoke with confidence about traditionally male issues like war, defense, crime, and foreign policy. What did Trump have to do in this debate? Two things. First of all, he had to come across as someone who is not mean and angry, obsessed with the past and prone to conspiracy theorizing. His campaign aides have urged him to fight Kamala on the issues. Yet, on the stump, Trump can't seem to stick to the script. He reads the policy portions of his speeches with an obvious lack of enthusiasm and returns often to complaining about alleged ballot fraud in 2020, insulting Harris, and unearthing conspiracy theories that make little sense. Trump began the debate with the advice from his advisors ringing in his head. His first answer on the economy took aim at the Biden record, one of the issues on which he has held a consistent lead throughout the campaign. But as time went on, his debate performance took the same course as the Trump rallies. He turned nearly every question into an answer about the threats from illegal immigration. Like the economy, this has been a good issue for him, but he did begin to sound like a Johnny One-Note on the topic. And it is not clear that this issue is as powerful in swing states like Pennsylvania as it is in border or more Republican states. Also, as the debate wore on, Trump simply could not stay away from weird stuff. He insisted that Democrats favored killing babies after they were born and allowing abortion in the 9th month. And he repeated a story about immigrants in Springfield, Ohio killing and eating people's cats and dogs. One of the moderators, David Muir, had to step in to point out that reporters had called Springfield city officials who had investigated the story and found it simply wasn't true. the second thing Trump needed to do was differentiate himself from the most extreme stances of his party, many of which are described by his former aides in Project 2025. As he has done in the past, he distanced himself from this document during the debate, claiming I have nothing to do with Project 2025. I haven't even read it. Although there are many questionable policies being considered by Trump and the right wing of the Republican Party, such as slapping huge tariffs on U.S. imports and deporting millions of immigrants, by far the most dangerous one for him politically is abortion. On that issue, his answer was, as it has always been, that everything is okay because now the states are deciding it. Not surprisingly, Harris's attack on abortion was exceptionally strong. She pointed out the many states that have passed highly restrictive abortion policies and, in some cases, have criminalized the behavior of doctors who are providing reproductive services. Abortion rights is the single most helpful issue for the Democrats in 2024. Republican strategists keep hoping the abortion issue can be buried, but recent steps by Trump allies in Florida and Texas have kept it alive. In the debate, Trump tried to distance himself from the extremes, arguing that he would approve of abortions for rape and incest and even going so far as to say the Florida 6-week ban is too short. Nonetheless, the coalition he leads isn't happy with his nods to moderation, and it is likely many Americans will continue to believe that he would sign a national abortion ban if a Republican Congress sent it to his desk. In conclusion, there are three kinds of presidential debates. The first is when one candidate lands a knockout blow against the other, as Ronald Reagan did with Jimmy Carter in 1980. The second is when the debate does little if anything to change the flow of the race. The Clinton/Dole debates in 1996 are a good example. The third, intermediate outcome occurs when a debate yields an advantage to one candidate without ending the other's chance to win, as happened when Mitt Romney bested President Obama in their first debate in 2012. The first, and perhaps only, debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris falls into this last category. After a month-long Harris surge that erased the advantage Trump had developed over President Biden, the race had stabilized during the past 2 weeks. This debate seems likely to put new wind in Harris's sails. Whether it will be enough to propel her to victory in the Electoral College remains to be seen. But her campaign and supporters leave the debate with renewed energy and hope. By contrast, the Trump campaign must reckon with the likelihood that their candidate's performance pleased his base without rallying many new supporters to his side. Throughout the race, Trump has enjoyed a solid lead on the question of strong leadership. While he may still hold an advantage, most Americans who watched the debate probably saw in Kamala Harris an adversary who held her ground, went on the attack whenever possible, and refused to be intimidated. This matters. On the face of it, the Trump campaign has an incentive to seek a rematch. If it does, the Harris campaign will probably insist on rules more to its liking. If not, this debate will stand as the last high-profile event before the November 5th election and as the race devolves into trench warfare, a battle of communications and organization in the states that will decide the outcome. Finally, in the minutes after the debate closed, the galactically famous singer Taylor Swift announced she would be voting for Kamala Harris. In today's world, this may be worth as much or even more than Harris's solid debate performance. What about you? What do you think about the issue we raised above? Please comment and let us know. Thank you for listening. God bless you. See you in the next video.